What's up, everyone, to Alabama Waters. This is episode 5. Like I said, if this is your first time joining us, I highly recommend going back and starting at episode 1 so you're not lost. Because if not, man, you missed everything. Because this episode is going to bring out a lot of things we learned along the way. All right, let's dive on in. This is day 3 back on the north end of Guntersville. And we're not going to take off too far from the ramp like we did in episode 1. But we're not going to the main channel. We're going to stay in that ditch almost the whole way. I'm just going to put my head down like I did before on the other side. And I'm going to see if anything looks different on this side. So once again, we're loading at the same bridge. I've had a good bunch of guys comment saying that's a Cormier Bridge or something like that. But I'm not even going very far. I'm just gonna idle over here. Man. All through this bridge looks good. Screw it, I got nowhere else to go. Guys, I'm just telling you, this is the way I love to practice. Like I said, where am I gonna drive to? I mean, it looks good. Let's fish it. I let kind of some guys load up and get out of the way first. So I fished around a little bit right there. And then I wanted to kind of, like I said, I don't mind fishing next to boat ramps. Sometimes those are phenomenal places because I never seen anyone fish them. They all load their boats and they take off. Plus this bridge looks really good. Remember how I told you I don't really like fishing bridges? So I'm not like hitting it crazy hard. Plus there's grass. Gotta realize there's grass. See how I'm hitting grass all out there? There's grass everywhere. Now, there's not a ton of grass underneath the bridge, mainly because it just gets deeper. So he's got deep water. Now, I'm just thinking to myself, if they're around here, I'll get a bite. I will say something interesting. Right here is where I idled through on episode 1 to get to the main river. Right in front of me. It's really shallow. I did notice there were some gizzards swimming up and down it, and there's a little bit of current there. That was the last time. So I'm looking at it going, stuff like that usually holds some fish, and there wasn't grass there, so I'm like, okay, there's an inside edge. Look, I get blown up on. I'm like, okay. But it missed it. I don't think it was a giant. But it was kind of where I thought I should get a bite. I gotta make sure, look around, make sure no one's watching. Then I get another bite, but it missed it. They don't seem big. I fished it pretty hard right there and nothing. So I'm like, okay, let's move on down this ditch a little bit further. I don't know how much further. I'm just going to kind of look to see if something piques my interest. So I'm not going to go far. And then I eventually go far enough to where I'm like, all right, I'm kind of tired of driving. Maybe a mile or two, and it starts all looking the same. So I'm just like, hey, I might as well just start fishing this bar, this shallow water, get up there, see if I see anything that looks interesting. I've been trying to figure out, there's paths that grow up there, there's matted grass. So far nothing looks like, oh, that's what I should be throwing. So what I'm gonna do is what I did before. I'm gonna zigzag, right? And when I say zigzag, you can see to my left right there how there's milfoil. Okay, that's all milfoil to my left. That there'll be pockets of milfoil. What I mean by pockets, like stretches of milfoil that come up to the surface, and then where I'm at, there's none. There's more milfoil there, and I'll weave in and out of there. Gilbert, half the time, is throwing exactly opposite of me. He's throwing to the left of me, and we zigzag. Sometimes I throw to the left, sometimes he throws to the right. We're covering tons and tons of water. Sometimes I go up there extremely shallow. Sometimes I go as far out there to the left as I can in the middle of the ditch, but the middle of the ditch still only 6 foot of water. I'll get all up in it. It's been swim jig, frog, swim bait, sexy dog, all the things, shallow hybrid hunter, all the things I've gotten bit on. And it's like pulling teeth to catch a fish. Once again, we go another at least 2 hours that morning without really catching one, without even really getting any bites. Now, I will say this. Gilbert's had more bites than me throwing out to the left. Now, he has hooks on and everything. He's had probably 3 or 4 swirls. And he hadn't hooked a one. Like, they're not eating it. So, I mean, I get in the middle of pads. And you can look. This goes on for miles like this, guys. Miles. And nothing really feels good. And I'm not trying to catch fish at the time. Heck, I just want to see one. Like, see one bust, see some action, see something. So I eventually get tired. I mean, we're talking 2 hours. We've had probably 5 or 6 swirls. I think I caught one 14-incher. Nothing impressed us. I said, okay, this is twice now. This is 2 days that I have fished up there in the same type of water without catching anything. So I'm almost about to start writing it off, because I know what it should look like. So once again, I'm gonna come mess around out in the middle, still trying a little, you know, always trying something a little bit different. Bunch of this milfoil. Like I said, I do catch one. I might have had 2 bites doing this, but it still wasn't great. And the fact that they missed it, a couple of them. So not only are they not big, some of them have missed it. So I finally come down a little bit further, and I don't really want to fish pads, but I can't help myself. I live on Rayburn. I know how to fish pads. They look pretty cool. I get right through here, and one blows up. Doesn't eat it, but it blows up. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know how to do this. I fish all through these pads. It's clear. It looks good. There's milfoil in there. We see some blow up in them. I see something blow up in them. I'm not going to sit there and 100% say they're bass, because I'm not going to leave you all suspenseful. I don't get bit in any of them. I mean, we saw some right in front of me up here bust like 3 times. I mean, in inches of water. Never saw any. Never got one to bite. You know, like I said, I'm not a big fan of fishing pads in November anyways. So I get on out of there. And I mean, you can see how shallow I'm in. I mean, I can see bottom. I'm stirring up mud. So then I get out here. There's a big giant point out here of grass. When I say a point, an underwater point of grass. It sticks way out here in the middle of this ditch. I fish all of it. I do get a bite, but once again, 45 minutes, nothing. I actually didn't catch anything. So now I'm just messing around, to be honest with you. I put the trolling motor on high and I go, and I eventually just start fishing the bank, because it kind of changes. It's a little less of the straight. You see how you can see some points in front of me, right? Because before it was almost all just straight bank. So now I'm just kind of cruising along, throwing my whopper plopper. Yes, and getting eelgrass. Now this might be the start of the eelgrass, of my hatred of eelgrass. Whopper ploppers or choppos and eelgrass, they don't like each other. They're not friends. They don't want to be friends. Well, they're by far rival enemies. And I think they will always be that way.
I swear I just saw one blow up.
I was driving on the lake, and out there now, we've ventured to where it starts opening up to the main, what I would call the main lake, where you can kind of see how now it's a pretty good ways. Those bars are still out there. Those bars of shallow grass are out there. Do I know exactly where? No. I can kind of halfway see them. I can see them on my map. But now I'm going to come out here. I think this is pretty much where most people fish, right? These shallow bars out here in this area. I don't like the grass. When you get out there, sometimes there's a lot of current, there's a lot of wind, it breaks it up. Sometimes that grass grows and if you ever touch it, it breaks off real easy. I want crisp grass that doesn't break when you hit it with baits and stuff. But I'm looking, and we're starting to see them bust. So I'm going, okay, like, we can see them up there. We're gonna get up there eventually to them. So I do now realize I did see some bust. So now I'm throwing my swim jig. We've been throwing around a bunch of them and haven't gotten any of them to bite.
That's what I think they are.
So now we're getting them to bust, and we can't get them to bite. I know why we can't get them to bite. I know what's going on. I do finally catch some on a swim jig. They're not big though. I ended up catching 3 or 4. What I'll tell you is this. Let's go over this type of grass and this type of scenario. What you'll see sometimes is the grass grows like that far from the surface or barely touches the surface. So if it just barely touches the surface or is an inch or 2 below the surface, because it looks like you don't see anything, but it's all there. Like it looks matted, but you can't literally see it on the surface. If you throw a topwater over it, you're gonna get hung up because it's right there. So the topwater really doesn't work. I'm throwing a swim jig because at least they can see it, but it's crystal clear. I think topwaters are better. The problem is since that grass is up here and the fish are down here, they're coming up through and busting, right? And if you look down in the grass, you see big pods of shad, big pods of them. And as they move through the grass, yes, some are up on top, but you can tell some are like a foot or 2 underneath the water. So those fish aren't busting on the shad that are on top. They're coming up underneath some, and they're chasing those up to the surface and exploding. So even though it looks like they're busting on shad, they're not busting on the shad that are on top. They're chasing the ones that are down here up and busting on them. So even if you threw something on top, that's not the ones they're going after. And it's so hard because it's still kind of shallow and you can't get your bait down, where the fish are because there's too much grass there. And even though it's sporadic grass, like they can swim through it, it's a bad recipe for what looks to be good, but it's not. All the other places where I was catching them weren't like that. The grass would grow up, the fish could get on top of the grass, or there were big giant holes in the grass. There's none of that here. It's all grass. It's all grass. There's almost no holes. And they're not in the holes. They're in the matted part of the grass. They're in the thicker part. So, yes, we fished around, And we did get bit, but they weren't big. And after eventually, I mean, we fished this twice. We rolled through it all the way, and once I caught some on a swim jig, I turned back around and went through it again, because we didn't catch anything the first time through there until I put on the swim jig. And we went back through it with the swim jig, caught a couple more. None of them were big. Now, could there have been big ones there? Maybe. It just, man, sometimes when they're on those shad in the fall, you do have to throw the right bait on them when they're on shad like that. What I was catching was either schooling ones that they had time and area to see your bait, right? And I didn't have to throw something like this. The ones that were schooling. Then I had other ones that were just 1s and 2s set up on big giant areas, and they were covering that area. So we fished there for a while. Didn't like it. Fished some other stuff. Didn't like it. Came back into here. Okay? Now this is important. As we come back into here, this is where I smashed on them the other day. I came back in here on purpose. I've had a miserable day 3. It hasn't been good at all. I know there were hundreds of fish here. They were all busting right here. The grass looks right. Everything's right about this. And I got nothing. I don't see any bust. I don't see any of them swimming around. We don't catch anything. This is what happened to me last time I was down here. I got down here and these fish like this burned me. And I was like, yep, that's what I was afraid of. I just had a horrible feeling that was going to be the case. That's why, although I got excited a little bit about it, the more I started to think about it, the more I dreaded even finding those fish. As I come around, you can see, when you see me make a big turn like that, that's not me following something. That's me looking at something going, something catches my eye. So this island catches my eye. But what's interesting about the island, and I haven't really figured it out yet, but what's interesting about the island, there is deeper water out here. The grass kind of came out too far. I didn't like that. I wanted to be there, less grass. But it was still pretty cool. So I leave there, don't catch anything. Once again, I'm like, something about this bait is really good. And if you notice, it was the same type of thing, okay? But you see what's different about it? See how there's no grass up there? There's not very much of it. There's only about 75, maybe 100 yards of bank in front of me. But there's the island right there to the right of where I just was. Look, they look just the same. But you see how there's not matted grass up there? There is grass. There's not a bunch of it. So I go down it. I get almost to the end. This is a pattern. Did you hear me what I said? It's a pattern. How many of y'all are following along? What's the pattern? Do y'all see it? Because I saw it. I saw it on the map. I'm gonna bring this map up and show y'all what I'm talking about.
Okay, here's what I want you to focus on. All right,
Everything
these
looked
islands.
right.
Now look where my finger.
I drove all through here.
Right below my finger. That's the island I was just on. Notice the green and red around it. Notice the other islands with green or red around it. Now notice the very top island up here. It's a point up here on the top left. See where the arrow is? Notice how there's no green or red around that point. You can also tell that you notice how it has a little bit of deeper water. Now that other island down here on the very bottom has deeper water around it too. But you see where that 16 foot is? A little drain comes in there and there's deeper water close to there and it's not as flat. That's key. I'm wondering now if that's the pattern. I think it is. And I'm about to go run it.
But when I saw it on the map, I was sitting there going, oh, okay, it's on the map. And I see it when I see the bank. And it started from that first chopo fish from day one on down that bank that had a little bit of deeper water. When I say steeper, just wasn't as flat as everything else. Not a ton of grass. There was grass, but not a ton. It wasn't all that matted up where I'm throwing on the edge of it. And that's two that happened quickly down a bank that looked like that. Now what I'm realizing, because I've looked on the map like this, not a lot of banks like that. And that bothers me. But I look at all these tournaments as there's going to be a main pattern and a secondary pattern and a third pattern and things to work off of, and maybe I can run a couple of banks like this for an hour and catch one or two. There's a lot of different things that can happen. But this is what's going on, so I'm going, hey, wait a minute. Let's go see. I got some time in the day. Let's go check this out. No, it's not a bass, is it? Well, no, it didn't look like one, but it could be. It is?
Hell yeah, it is. This is the biggest. Alright. This is what I'm gonna do for it. This is what I'm gonna do.
This is like it. No one's doing
it. Kind of weird. It looked like a freaking pike or something.
I know.
Nobody hitting any of this stuff. They're on these banks. They don't freaking crappy banks. Sorry about that.
That's just too weak. That's just no one's hitting them, and there's no grass.
I'm gonna go up here to this next one.
Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. I guess I see it. I just need it. This is the way I catch a big one. It's channel swings too. That's the main. It's just like yesterday.
There it is, guys. It happens that quick. When you can run down the bank and you're driving along and you see it, right? You see how I was running down. I made a right-hand turn and just stopped on the bank, and 4 casts in, I catch a giant. That's me seeing it. I now see the pattern. And now I'm just going to go run stuff for the rest of the day. Now, here's my advice. This is what I do. I fish stuff that sort of looks good. If it looks really good, like what I just did, I'll put a mark on it and not fish it. I really have that much confidence. If it looks almost like it's supposed to, then what I'll do is I'll end up fishing it. What I did for the rest of the day is I had one more bite, but I just fished stuff that almost looked right but didn't look right. And that was the end of my day. But my horrible day turned really good because now I have another pattern. I don't think it's my main pattern, but it's a chance to catch a big one, and it's something no one's doing. That's the stuff I look for. So if you've got all that going on in your head, you're following along, you got a whole bunch of patterns, you're looking at the map, hey man, I'm now ready for day 4. Let's go see what happens. Stay tuned.
Next time on Alabama Waters. See y'all guys.